That bring back memories.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Football History Podcast with myself, Nick Hart, and my co-pilot, Mr. Neil Fissler. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hello, mate. How you going? Sorry we haven't put one out in quite a long time, but we've been rather busy with work and life getting in the way. So we're going to make up for it. We're going to knock out 2 or 3 over the next few days and flood the market again.
So joining us on what I consider to be a very special show because as a Millwall fan, this player is one of our great figures. He went on to greater things, I think, arguably at Sunderland. But joining us now is football fan, and I'm going to call you an author, Mark Metcalf. How are you, mate?
Good afternoon.
Charlie Hurley, as I've described him already, Mark. I mean, he's described by the Lion Roars, a Millwall fanzine in 2008, as our greatest ever player. It was a result of a poll taken by the fanzine. And at Sunderland, the Black Cats, he's described as player of the century. Is that a fair description in your view as a fan, Sunderland fan?
Yeah. I mean, I'm coming up with 62 this year, so I'm fortunate that I saw Charlie play. It was towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
I have one particular personal fond memory. The season we were walloped 8-0 at Upton Park. Jeff Hurst scored 6.
Right.
So it was something of a bitter pill, that one. The first one, he actually handled into the back of the net. Anyway, we played them again not too long after that. And so there was a great desire for retribution, certainly by winning the game. And at one point, Jeff Hurst got free. He was heading through on goal and he smashed the ball towards the goal. And Charlie dived. When I say dived, more or less along the ground. And the ball hit him in the face, went wide. And Sunderland actually won the game 2-1. And the cheers at that point were enormous and sort of summed up Charlie's desire as a footballer. Great footballers not only have skill, they also have a great drive and determination to show that skill and also to have a never say die attitude, no matter what the score is. And Charlie Hurley possessed that and more, both for Millwall and for Sunderland, but also for Ireland. And he regularly, as a proud Irishman, travelled overnight on Saturdays to go across the Irish Sea to play for his country. And he did so often without having any sleep before they played on the Sunday afternoon. So, you know, he had a loyal and passionate following, both amongst the Millwall fans, the Irish fans, and the Sunderland supporters. So, yeah, that was, I remember it well. I remember being with my dad. When I wrote Charlie's authorised biography, I did so because my father had died in 2004 and I was seeking to do something in his memory whilst also seeking to move on into writing more generally for a living. And when my son came on in 2008, the book was dedicated to both my son, who's called Charlie, certainly not as good a header or a footballer as Charlie Hurley. Very few people are, of course, and to my dad. So I was very pleased for that. The book came out actually in the October of 2008. Came out in the weekend, this sort of same weekend, October the 4th. Number of reasons for that is Charlie's birthday is October the 4th. There are also 2 significant political events. East London, it was the Battle of Cable Street, the day that Charlie was born, and also it was the day that a number of people set off on the Jarrow March where there was mass unemployment. So the three connections were important to me. We had, the numbers of people who turned up to the book signing were extraordinary. I actually came into the town centre to Waterstones on the Friday. It was the Friday afternoon, and I couldn't understand why there were so many people there. And as I got near to Waterstones, obviously I'd never done anything like this before. I was like, what are all these people doing here? And then, of course, I realised they were all there. They weren't there to see me by any means. In fact, there was a couple of instances where people told me to stop pushing in the queue, which was quite nice, until a couple of my mates who actually were at the do said, I'm going to sit in. He wrote the book, so you best actually let him in. I mean, you can't actually sign 250 odd books in like an hour and a half. It's just not. It's just not physical.
Some fee if you can.
That, really. And then we had the similar sorts of numbers at the club shop, and we had to do on the Friday evening, which was absolutely packed out. So it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, if every day had been as good as that, being an author, I'd be a rich man. Unfortunately, I'm certainly not, really. It's hard work putting together books. Takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of patience. Charlie, very good footballer.
Is the book still available out there, Mark?
It's not. The book isn't available. You can download it for free.
Okay.
You can get it on eBay and things like that. But the book's sold out in about 3 years. I did put out a second edition about 3 years ago, but unfortunately, my mate who helped us put it out at the same time as we did the highly successful Fred Spikesley book. Unfortunately, David died not too long after that, and I haven't really sought to find another publisher. But it is available to download from my own site, which is just write a Mark Metcalf, go to the football section. It's somewhere at the bottom. It's somewhere at the bottom there, or maybe you can add, you can add the details to your own website. It's not quite the same. It's not quite the same book. The major change to the book is that Charlie was actually voted, as it comes down to, in truth, only the best player of the first 99 years, because in fact we've subsequently discovered that Sunderland FC was formed on the 25th of September 1880 and not October 79. I haven't yet told Charlie that he's only the best player of the first 99 years, in case somebody sneaks in at the very end to take away his something that he's very, 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 very proud about. I mean, how did he end up at Millwall? I mean, it's a great story in itself. Obviously, like a lot of people from his background, high levels of poverty in Ireland. So they moved from Cork almost immediately on his birth. In fact, the next time he went back to Ireland was actually to play for Ireland 20 years later. He lived in East London during the Blitz. One of the tragedies early in his life, he was out playing football with a great mate of his called Gordon Smith. And what happened was the air raid sirens went off, and his dad had always insisted that he come home. He was half and half. He was going to go to Gordon's house. You probably know what the rest of the tale is. He went home. Following day, woke up, and unfortunately, his mate had been killed, or the whole family had been slaughtered. So he was lucky in that respect. I mean, football was a different era. Obviously, Second World War, massive crowds, but there wasn't the scouting systems which took place. But he played for Essex. He played good local football. Initially, he didn't have any football boots. His mum and dad couldn't afford that. And when he did get them, obviously they were his prized possessions. It's not like today. He played in them for 3 years. My son is 13, 14, and he doesn't play in football boots. He doesn't get as much kick out of them as well. But that would be the situation. Fortunately, we've got a better standard of living today.
Absolutely.
So anyway, West Ham sought to sign him, by which point he had, in fact, got a job at Ford's Dagenham, like a lot of Irish people. And his dad was a tool maker there. Charlie was an apprentice, really apprentice. It wasn't a serious trade. Nevertheless, the pay he got was more than what he was offered to sign for West Ham. And in a large family, the family needed the extra £1 a week, so he turned it down. He was playing for Raynham Youth Club in a final, and he actually, there was a lad there who was rated to be a top class player, and Charlie marked him out of the game. And afterwards, Bill Voicey, who obviously worked for Millwall for a very long time, he seen him and he said, "Do you fancy signing for Millwall?" Charlie's a fairly sort of matter-of-fact type character. And when I interviewed him, he said, why would anybody... He says, I was trying to take no notice of this old bloke. I wanted him to go away. And he said, why would anybody want to sign me on the basis of one game? But in fact, Millwall did want to sign him. And he sat down with Bill and he sat down with Charlie Hewitt, who was the manager of Millwall at the time. And he signed for the club at twice what his wages were at the Fords Dagenham. Yeah. What was also quite a nice story is that the foreman where he was at was saying, "Hey, Charlie," I can't do the Irish accent. I can't do any other Irish
Probably
accent.
Best you don't try, Mark.
I think it's probably a wise move, to be fair. So he basically said to him, he was telling them, like, you could get injured. You'd be better off stopping here. Oh, of course, all the rest of the working class blokes where he was working, they were like,
"Take it,
are you crackers?" cheering him to the rafters. You know what I mean? Come on, go and do your best. Like most working class
people would do. Yeah.
They would want one of their own. Obviously, it's a very popular song. He's one of our own. It's not just about that they're from the same area, or it's because they're from the same sort of class background, isn't it? Really, it's an opportunity to get out of the grimy, horrible place to work. Fords Dagenham. I've got many friends who have worked there. I'm not doing them a disservice by saying it was horrible.
No, if you have a choice of playing football for a living, Mark,
given the choice, you take the football. Yeah. Of course you do. I mean, we've charted this extremely well in the book on Fred Spikes. We called him the first great working class footballer. That joy of not having to go to work and doing something you want to do and outside. And so, Charlie, he was 16, very good footballer. Even at 16, he made his first team debut for Millwall at the age of 17. So it shows what a good player he was. Went down to Torquay. They went there and back in the same day.
We're talking about 1953 here, Mark, aren't we?
1954, we're talking.
1954.
He was born 36. Birthday in the October. Played in the January the 30th. 1954, 2's a piece draw. For the game, all the lads in the team are saying to him, just do your best, you'll be okay. And afterwards, they're all saying, "Bye, who are you? Can you play like that every week?" He'd made a real impression on these footballers. The Millwall were in the 3rd Division South. Yeah. They were doing okay, and they did do okay the first couple of seasons. But the problem with that was that to go up, you had to finish top, and they didn't. They finished 5th on one occasion, but then struggled a little bit. The man who had the most impression, without doubt, on Charlie as a footballer was the goalkeeper Malcolm Fillingson, who went on to replace Bert the Cat Williams at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Williams probably the greatest goalkeeper that's ever played for Wolves. And they've had one or two good ones over the years. But Malcolm wasn't very far behind him. He didn't play internationally because he was in Scotland and they had a few good goalkeepers. But Malcolm's attitude was quite straightforward. Firstly, even 40 years later when Charlie seen him, Charlie referred to him as his dad. So that gives you an idea of who was in charge of that defence, basically. Yeah. And Malcolm was, as is one, he just said, if I'm coming for the ball, get out of the way. And if you don't get out of the way, not only will I get the ball, but I'll get you. And that was Malcolm's attitude. He was an exceptionally talented goalkeeper, very, very brave goalkeeper, and proved ultimately to be a brilliant signing by Stan Cullis. Played behind the great Billy Wright and in a fantastic Wolves team. Well, he was a big impression. There were other players, John Shepard, for example, up front, who was a talented goal scorer. very mobile footballer, John Shepard, and a brave player. I don't know if you have ever interviewed his daughter, but his daughter did that fantastic
She has a book. Yeah.
That's a really. Is it just from something like The Lion's Den? I'm forgetting it.
In and Out of the Lion's Den or something.
In and Out of the Lion's Den. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic book.
Yeah, Julie, very nice young lady.
Yeah, a great book. I got some copies and all that. Was delighted to read it as well. But the atmosphere at Millwall, according to one or two others like Bill Lloyd, who became a goalkeeper as well, a few of them wasn't that good. Charlie Hewitt was very much the old school type manager, and
he divided opinion. Mark is the modern.
He divided opinion. Yes, he divided. That's one way of putting it. Yes,
cheerful indeed. Charlie Hewitt.
He was to be ironically sacked on New Year's Day, which was a bit of a cruel way of being got rid of in 1956 and replaced by Ron Gray. Now Charlie actually came into the team and he replaced what was slightly unusual. In his place, Jerry Bowler, who was also a ball-playing centre-back. Malcolm says that you could come off a game in muddy conditions, and you would have thought Jerry might have just come on at the end. So clean were his clothes at this point. Now that definitely wasn't the case with Charlie. He got stuck in, but the admiration that the Millwall fans, and they had some hard players, Millwall. Stan Anslaw, who was a very, very good footballer, and who at one point actually was pushed upfield in one of the seasons and scored over a dozen league goals. He was there's that wall down the side, isn't there, at Millwall, and he was fairly well known for putting opposing outside lefts or out into that wall. To be fair. He's still a good footballer. He took good penalties as well, as I understand it. Pat Saywood, obviously a very good, talented player for Millwall. But Charlie was loved not only because of his never-say-die attitude and his heading ability, because he could get the ball down and he could play. He could pass. And that was unusual. He took a gamble in the early stages at his career at Millwall to try and play. He was quite quiet. He's taking in the things that were going on around him and learning. But at the same time, he did want to express the fact that he had skills. I mean, and the fact that he tried to play football actually cost him when he went to Sunderland, because in these first two games, Sunderland conceded 7 and 6. And as he says, he went to the bingo one night and the bloke said 7 and 6 was Charlie Hurley worth it. So that was the case with Charlie. And he did, he had a very poor couple of games. But yeah, so he was a very, very good player. He was in at the same time he had to do his national service, and that cost him perhaps the opportunity. Well, it did cost him the opportunity to play in the big game of the 1950s, which was the Birmingham City game in the quarterfinals, I believe, in the FA Cup. And Millwall had deservedly, and obviously, even now I'm still happy about that, managed to beat the reigning FA Cup holders, which was Newcastle United. And there's some great pictures, isn't there, of that game with the fans hanging on to the turnstile, hanging on to the floodlights, and there's some fantastic ones. Now, what had happened is that he'd actually said something slightly out misplaced, and so he wasn't going to be allowed off camp anywhere to play in the game. But in fact, it was already agreed in advance that he wasn't going to play in that match. They were going to keep the same side. Actually, it worked against Millwall because Birmingham, they beat them easily, beat them 4-1, and obviously they went on to reach the final. They were beaten by Manchester City in the final. Arguably, Birmingham's greatest day up until they won the League Cup. It was 10 years or a decade ago. So Charlie was playing football. He also had a spell, which I'll come. The reason why he came back into the team was quite straightforward. He was missing for quite a long time because he suffered an injury whilst playing for the army team. Right. It had actually been said to him he didn't have to play in this particular game, but he thought he would use it as a bit of a warm-up for his international debut against Spain. And the problem with that was that he got injured and he couldn't play. And he came back into the team and they played him centre forward. They actually got well beat Millwall in both of those games. He came back. He scored in both of them. And if you ask Charlie now, he would tell you that given the opportunity, he would have played centre forward. His career would have been as a centre forward. And he regretted that at the end. Now, during the period of time Charlie was there, to give you some idea of how well he was playing, is he was selected for the first side from England to play in European football. So he was selected for the London side against Frankfurt, 24th of October, 1955, game played at Wembley.
England, and this was a combination team, Mark, wasn't it? London.
It was a combination team.
Combined.
Him and Vic Groves were the two from the third division. Bobby Robson, for example, was playing. And 2-0 down, they won 3-2. Papers generally agreed that if he wasn't the best player on the field, he's very close to it. Now, we're talking here a lad who'd just gone age 19, who was showing that he was a good footballer in third division football. He could get the ball, he would fight hard for the ball. But against the top class footballers, he could also play. Problem was he was injured by the time next time came along. And unfortunately, he never played European football again, which is why he was so keen, in particular, to play for Ireland.
The Ireland side,
yeah. No, he made his debut for Ireland before he went to Sunderland. It was in the summer of 57, end of the season, 56, 57. Cut a very long story short, with less than 20 seconds remaining, Ireland were beating England 1-0. He come into the tide after being hammered 5-1 at Wembley. Game was played at Dalymount Park in Dublin. First time he'd been back to Ireland. And if Ireland had held on to that, what would have meant is Ireland would have travelled to Denmark, which they subsequently won that game. And if they'd won that game, the two teams would have played off again for to go to Sweden. He was up against Tommy Taylor, and he did very well. Iron of ironies, John Attio in particular scored the goal, if I recall rightly. John Attio was one of those players which Charlie often struggled against. You have certain players who you struggle against, and Attio was definitely one of them. His mobility and in the air always meant that a very good game of football was guaranteed between those two footballers. The other person who Charlie might have struggled against when he played, if there was the things he did generally pretty well against one-to-ones, was Derek Dougan. Him and Derek Dougan are right battle royal, and Wyn Davies, who was
Welsh,
also a great footballer, played for Bolton and played for Newcastle. Yeah. Those were the three players you could see. Against the rest, he did pretty well. He played against Greaves, for example, at Roker Park on a number of occasions, and as Jimmy said, he never scored against them. A bit different down at White Hart Lane, where Jimmy scored a few goals against Charlie and some of the other players. But it was said of that Tottenham side of the six. No, I better not say that, otherwise I'm going to get into trouble of mates of mine who follow Tottenham Hotspur. So we'll see. So he moved for a fee of 18,000 in the October 57, plus a friendly which brought in £3,000.
The different times,
21,000. Now, you work that out. That was the highest transfer fee at the time.
Yeah,
was John Charles, which was £65,000. Now, if you work that out, so it was a third of the highest transfer fee. So a comparable figure in today's football is that Charlie Hurley would have been transferred at the age of 21, just 21, for a figure of about £35 million. Wow. That gives you an idea. It's the sort of sums of money that Rio Ferdinand was transferred from West Ham to Leeds, and then from Leeds on to Manchester United. It gives you just some idea of his standing, and that was despite the fact that his injury had left him with a little bit. It reduced his ability, certainly, to make a sliding tackle, which were a key component of the game at that time. You can't get away with such tackles, of course, today. No question about that. So he would have been happy to be fair with that. So it gives you a good standard of how good he was. Initially, when he went to Sunderland, well, he was rubbish, to be fair. He struggled badly. The 7-6, but then the third game 0-0 against Preston North End. So he was on his way. But Sunderland actually were a brand new team. Alan Brown was putting together a brand new team. Interesting manager Alan Brown certainly left Burnley with a tremendous group of footballers who subsequently went on to win the league in 59-60. But he decided to get rid of a lot of the old guard, and probably too quickly. He probably did that just that little bit too quickly. And Sunderland were relegated at the end of the 57-58 season. They should, in fact, have been relegated at the end of the previous season, when they were let off lightly, despite having been shown to have made under-the-counter payments at the same time every other club was doing the same. That would be true to say. But they should have had it.
Been a strange move, actually, Mark, but it wasn't, because I think I'm right in saying that Charlie Hewitt was actually scouting for Sunderland at the time, wasn't he? So it was him that recommended Charlie Hurley.
You might be right. You could be right. If it's in the book, I'd be right. But you one up on me, then Dale. You one up on me. I can't remember that. Nice one.
And Charlie would go on to be the Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year. It comes second to Bobby Moore, I should say.
He did in 64. I mean, that was the year at Sunderland came second to Leeds United to gain promotion. It took Sunderland a while to get back into the first division. Obviously, 58. It was we always had on the front of the programme.
Yeah.
That would never been relegated, played every season in the first division. And that wasn't the case after 57-8. Struggled badly, 58-59. And at one point, there was a serious threat they'd go down to the third division. That would never happen to Sunderland, of course. And so, having watched them now for 4 seasons,
too big a club.
Having watched them for 4, well, not 4, obviously didn't see them last season. Although I did, I saw them play with Lincoln at one point. So we've got that, and we struggled. How did Charlie is popularly known at Sunderland as the King, okay? And he got that reputation after scoring a number of goals against Luton Town at the end of the 1960, and he was given that definition by Vince Wilson in the Sunday Mirror. That season, 60-61, obviously Tottenham did the double. Sunderland really should have beaten them at Roker Park. We were very unfortunate not to do that. Got hammered in the replay, 5-0. My dad, who went to that game, didn't go to a lot of away games, to be fair. He said, it was a fantastic Tottenham team, one of the best that he's seen, to be fair. So there was no shame in that, and it showed Sunderland that they could do well. In the next 2 seasons, they lost out on the last game. Particularly unlucky against Chelsea in 62-63. Chelsea need to beat us and then beat Portsmouth, which they subsequently did. Probably one of the most unusual goals. I always like telling this story. Ever scored at Roker Park. The ball came across and went into the goal off Tommy Harmer's middle bit, as they would say. So we were well and truly fucked. We haven't not edited that out, to be honest. So anyway, 63-64 had a tremendous side. Again, got to the quarterfinals and were beaten by Manchester United after one of the games in particular. Arguably, that there was up to 100,000 people turned up to the quarterfinal replay against Manchester United. So great was the crowd that the Manchester United players had to walk to the ground from a good 1.5 miles away.
Wow.
So there was massive numbers. Sadly, a couple of people were killed. Too many people present. Anyways, that finished as a draw. Both times Sunderland were leading until the very final minute of the game, but were hammered in the replay 5-1. Anslaw, although we were winning 1-0, that was down at 66,000 at Leeds Road in Huddersfield. Shows the glory of the FA Cup at that particular point. We got promotion by beating Charlton Athletic, and there's quite famous photographs of Charlie going round with his arms right up in the air, shouting and cheering, with the whole crowd chanting, "Charlie, Charlie, Charlie." And that was the period of time also where we had played the previous season against Everton, we had played Everton that season in the league. They were the league champions, and we beat them 3-1. We used to come out of the Z-Cars thing, and this particular event they came out to, "Charlie is me darling." And he was, no question about that. Charlie Hurley was like the darling of the crowd. Mid-60s, you could often go to the ground and you would hear, when they got corners, people would want Charlie to go forward. That was an idea given to him by Stan Anderson, who said, "Look, you should push forward." And he scored a lot of goals, which is one of the reasons he would have preferred to be a centre forward as well. And you could hear the "Charlie, Charlie," and you can hear Match of the Day 67, 68 away to Coventry. Sunderland get a 2s apiece draw, and you can hear the Sunderland fans shouting "Charlie, Charlie." So the desire for him to play was a very, very strong one. What also endeared Charlie to the crowd was not only his on-field attributes, but his off-field attributes. He would stand for ages and ages and ages and sign autographs. He would go to events. He would talk to the fans. It's a part of the game which is sadly, for lots of different reasons, has been lost.
It's been eroded.
Yeah. And so, and like I said, when we had the book out, and he came to some of the events, I mean, it was hard. It was heartwarming. We had lads who were coming up and saying, "This is the first book I've bought since I left school." And these were blokes in their 50s, which was sad in a way. But at the same time, it showed what sort of stature that the man had, not only as a player, but as an individual, as somebody that fans could identify with. He was a well-paid player, Charlie, at Sunderland. I mean, he was the third highest, best player in the 60s. Which is the reason ultimately why he stayed at Sunderland. I would contend and argue. Throughout this period, he continued to play for his country. He was the best player for his country. That title could have been challenged by Johnny Giles, but Johnny didn't do as much travelling for Charlie. I mean, Charlie went everywhere with his team, and there's a famous, very, very famous game where he plays away to Poland, and there's 100,000 at the match, and the crowd are chanting his name. They're singing his name because he was that good a footballer.
And that well-known player.
So he was by no means in the shadow of players. Johnny Crossan, who played for Standard Liège against the Real Madrid team, who were a very good team, basically said Johnny's still very much alive. He's got his own exceptionally good autobiography. He said Charlie could have played anywhere. He said no doubt about that. He had that ability. He had those skills to do so. He was the best centre half in English football in the mid-60s. I think that's what you'd have to say. And whilst he played for my own team, and I'm very delighted for that, it's a great shame that between 62, it's a shame someone didn't go up in 62, and he could have been seen at the
on a wider stage, so to speak,
when he was actually coming towards that situation. That is the thing. But he at the same time, he has the adoration of Sunderland fans. It's still not unusual to hear the song of "Who's the greatest centre half the world has ever seen." It's still not unusual to hear that at the football. Not as regular as it used to be, but it's by no means unusual. And and when he was able and was still going to, big occasions, he came to the Doctor's Day, for example, at Millwall in 2007. And I know that him and Malcolm Fillingson, and they got a great reception. I know that they were really heartwarmed by that occasion. So he has a
Fantastic.
great admiration. Obviously, he went to be manager of Reading. He did pretty well. I suppose the whole time at Reading can be summed up by the fact that he was associated with Robin Friday.
Well, that was going to be a point I was going to ask you about, because
he just said he was mad.
Here. Yeah,
he just said he was mad. So there's no other words to use that I can use about him. Obviously, he had to move him on.
Genius and madness.
And Charlie did okay at Reading. He took them to promotion. He'd had a brief period at Bolton between 69 and 71. Didn't do well. Bolton didn't do well by any shape, form, or fashion. He definitely lost the remaining speed that he had, and he struggled in a poor team. And then he became his decision to not take the job at First Division Sheffield United was based, as the manager during his period at Reading, was based on the fact that Joan, his wife, she didn't want to move back north. She said, we're staying down south. That's where I'm from, London lass.
Yeah.
And still playing tennis. She is, so she's still fit and healthy. And so that's the reason. So that was a poor decision on Charlie's part. He's very much a family man. And a very good footballer. Doing the book with him, I mean, I'll tell you straight, I would got the book done. I'd finished the book before I approached him to do it. He would have quite rightly gone, well, I know, but who are you, basically? So I more or less went to him and said, look, it's done. Do you want a piece of the action? And then he went, yeah, okay, that was the case. We got large numbers of people to come to the events. When I say we, him plus me, that would be the truth of the matter. Although without the book, of course, we wouldn't have been able to do it
in the first place.
So did play some role in that, but under no illusions that people would turn up because of myself. And the book was very well received, and I'm not sure. I mean, it's the best-selling book on any single Sunderland footballer. I think possibly the biggest-selling book on Sunderland is Lance Hardy's book about the 1973 FA Cup winning team, which, for those, if anybody hasn't got it and just wants, a decent book, is a fantastic book. It really is exceptionally well written. And bit of a tragedy that Lance died not so long ago. Really, at a very, very early age. Really. So that's Charlie Hurley.
Charlie's still with us, Mark. I see. I'm just looking at.
He is. Yes. He is. Yes.
And so, thankfully, still with us. Aged 84, born in 1936, as we've said at the start. He played 105 times for the Lions, scoring twice. 402 appearances for Sunderland between 57 and 69. 23 goals for Sunderland. And then to conclude his playing career, at least 43 appearances with Bolton, 3 goals. Total of 550 Football League appearances and 28 goals across those teams. And then 40 appearances for the Republic of Ireland, scoring twice. And
he was for many, many years. I mean, 40 appearances, that's a fantastic record. One with the Millwall, 38 with Sunderland, and one with Bolton Wanderers when he was, he loved playing for his country. Well, he loved playing football, to be fair, first and foremost. And just as importantly, he loved being properly paid for his football. And that was an important quality. Charlie was nobody's fool. Yeah. And he had, he would tell you, most Sunderland fans would hate this for being said, but Charlie's great hero was Jimmy Hill. Jimmy Hill meant that he got properly paid
for
the efforts that he put in. And he, Charlie wanted to play for Sunderland, but he was nobody's fool. He wanted to be well rewarded for the efforts,
his popularity,
that
absolutely
put in. Absolutely the case. And he played in a good team, that 64 team. It's just as I said, it's just a shame they didn't get promoted just that couple of years earlier when he was at his peak, you know.
Funnily enough, I was going to say that he's actually one of 3 brothers to play for Millwall. Chris Hurley, who was also a central defender, and also signed from Rainham Town, actually scored an own goal on his debut. I think he played about 4 or 5 games for us and scored an own goal against Mansfield when we got whooped up at Field Mill one year. And there was actually a 3rd brother called Arthur.
Didn't know that.
And but this came from Charlie himself, because when I was writing a Millwall Who's Who book, we were trying to find Chris, and he casually mentioned this 3rd brother, Arthur, who'd played a few games for us, A-team games, reserve team games, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, I think all 3 brothers have fallen out, and that they no longer speak. So
that's a shame.
Bit of a sad tale, but absolutely great player. Somebody that will be remembered long beyond his years. I think
Charlie will be remembered for a long time. I don't think there'll be any doubt whatsoever. I mean, it's the Charlie Hurley gets at the ground. I mean, there was a plan to some mates of mine set away a campaign for a statue, which I said, I think it was, especially as it was 2017 and we were struggling, and that was a premature move. Of the money that we got, we put towards a new mural at the ground. So there's a mural of Charlie at the ground, and just this last few weeks, there's a new banner of Charlie has been done by it's called the Red and White Army, which very pleased, took some photographs. Going to make sure Charlie gets some copies of that, and so yeah, he'll be remembered for a long time. Will Charlie? I mean, it's too early to say now, but I won't be around when the possibility of that will happen. But one of the jobs I've got is I put plaques up for the Professional Footballers Association. Now you have to be dead for 20 years, so you know, I'd hope in the future somewhere and somebody will put up a plaque to Charlie to that in that way. But yeah, he'll be remembered. I mean, one of the reasons he'll also be remembered, you know, and this is not blowing my own trumpet, the fact that we got the book as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things, you know, initially was like, well, I'm not sure about the book, and I think John basically just said to him, you know, what do you mean you're not sure about a book? You know, why wouldn't you want a book about it? It's done. You know, get on with it. Basically, that was the case, really. So, you know, his history is recorded. It exists, and as I said, large numbers of people want a copy of the book. They bought copies of the book, and you know, they were pleased to have got copies. So, you know, it's all down there, isn't it? Really, it's all down there stuff. in an era where he didn't feature too many times on the television and the rest of it. The book
absolutely
stands as a sort of, you know, it's a memory of Charlie.
That's wonderful stuff, Mark. Just to conclude the show, listeners, I found the Irish newspaper, the Sunday World from 2000. They had like an all-time great article, all-time great Irish side. Centre halves, they had Charlie Hurley alongside Paul McGrath in their ideal side, and just a little paragraph which I thought I'd read to conclude the show. Charlie was one of the Republic's best at a time when that wasn't a passport to riches. Story about Charlie Hurley and his contemporaries travelling over on the Holyhead boat the night before matches are not tales, they are true. For physical strength, tackling, awareness and commitment to the cause, Charlie Hurley was truly special. And I think everything that you've said, Mark, reinforces that short paragraph in the Sunday World in 2000. So wonderful stuff. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Mark. It's been
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Lovely to meet you today.
All right, thanks for your time. I hope very much that Sunderland will be playing Millwall next season. You may, for those who don't know, I was responsible for facilitating the Millwall fans who went on the pitch at Sunderland in 2017-18 to make the presentation to the Bradley Lowry Foundation for the funds that they had raised towards that. My son and myself also went on and collected the banner which they'd done at the away game at Millwall. It'd be nice to say that there was anybody saw that, but as nearly 90% of my mates downstairs were having a pint, it would be an inaccurate representation. So thank you.
The moment happened. That's wonderful stuff. Lovely stuff.
Thanks
Mark.
very much, Neil.
All
Thanks very much, Nick. Thanks for inviting me. Cheers for now, man.
Cheers.
Ta-ra.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.